introduction, and you know more or less the plot of the story. So there is this family that is about to embark on a journey to go to vacation from Georgia to Florida, and there is this grandmother who is, in a sense, just a lovely, nice, if slightly mischievous, old lady who is can be seen, alternatively, as quite endearing in one way, as representative of a certain way of being, and who, through the story, increasingly challenges ideas of what to be good is. So they embark on this trip. So it's very simple. So family traveling. They stop at the barbecue. There is a conversation, but ominously, from the beginning, there is this news on a newspaper about a misfit, a criminal who has escaped from prison and is roaming around. And already from the beginning, knowing Flannery O'Connor, the first time even I read this novel, I knew that this was the prelude to a confrontation towards the end of the novel. And surely enough, at some point in the novel, the family kind of chances upon this criminal who kills all of them. Okay, so sorry for those who have not read the novel, I'm spoiling the end, but that's basically the story. And the final part of this novel, especially the conversation, the strange exchange between the misfit and the grandmother, is really the apex, is the place where there is a strange dynamic going on, and which opens, really, I think, to a number, actually an undetermined number of outcomes, I think. So I know it's, you might have read the story, I know it's a bit long, but I really think we should read. I've edited it slightly to make it shorter. The last part of this story, A Good Man Is Hard to Find, which we find page 3 in your handout. Listen. So we are at the point in which the misfit and his two accomplices are killing, or have already killed, the son of the grandmother with his wife and the two children, or are in the process of killing them as he speaks with the grandmother. And the grandmother is pleading for her life. Of course she is. And this could have been ended, by the misfit killing her, like he had done for the other members of the family. And instead, there is this conversation, and whether or not it is believable is obviously something which is up for debate. Why he kept this woman alive until the end, why he engaged in a conversation with her, and whether that kind of exchange is something that might have happened, could have happened in reality. Listen, the grandmother almost screamed, I know you are a good man. You don't look like you have common blood. I know you must come from nice people. Yes, madam, he said, finest people in the world. When he smiled, he showed a row of strong white teeth. It's a beautiful day, said the grandmother. Listen, she said, you shouldn't call yourself the misfit, because I know you are a good man at heart. I can just look at you and tell. I appreciate that, lady, the misfit said, and drew a little circle in the ground with the butt of his gun, which incidentally, sorry to make a little interruption, I don't know and I'm sure it's intentional, makes me think of Jesus when he met the adulterous woman and was writing with signs on the ground. And there are a number of veiled references to the gospel which I think are meant to orient the reader in a certain direction. I just wanted to put this there. "I just know you're a good man," she said desperately. "You are not a bit common." "No, I ain't a good man," the misfit said after a second, as if he had considered the statement carefully, "but I ain't the worst in the world either. My daddy said I was a different breed of dog from my brothers and sisters. You know, Daddy said, it's some that can live their whole life out without asking about it, and it's others has to know why it is. And this boy is one of the latters. He's going to be into everything." "Daddy was a cad himself," the misfit said. "You couldn't put anything over on him. He never got in trouble with the authorities, though, just had the knack of handling them." Someone, the father, who in some sense managed to remain a good man in the eyes of society. So that's basically what is behind this sentence. "You could be honest too if you'd only try," said the grandmother. "Think how wonderful it would be to settle down and live a comfortable life and not have to think about somebody chasing you all the time." The misfit kept scratching in the ground with the butt of his gun as if he were thinking about it. "Yes, madam, somebody is always after you," he murmured. The grandmother noticed how thin his shoulder blades were just behind his hat because she was standing up looking down on him. "Do you ever pray?" she asked. He shook his head. All she saw was the black hat wiggle between his shoulder blades. "No," he said. "I was a gospel singer for a while." The misfit said, "I've been most everything. Been in the armed service, both land and sea, at home and abroad, been twice married, been an undertaker, been with the railroads, plowed Mother Earth, been in a tornado, seen a man burnt alive once." And he looked up at the children's mother and the little girl who were sitting close together, their faces white and their eyes glassy. "I even see a woman flogged," he said. "Pray, pray," the grandmother began. "Pray, pray." "I never was a bad boy that I remember of," the misfit said in an almost dreamy voice, "but somewheres along the line I done something wrong and got sent to the penitentiary. I was buried alive." And he looked up and held her attention to him by a steady stare. "That's when you should have started to pray," she said. "What did you do to get sent to the penitentiary the first time?" "Turn to the right, it was a wall," the misfit said, looking up again at the cloudless sky. "Turn to the left, it was a wall. Look up, it was a ceiling. Look down, it was a floor. I forget what I done, lady." I sat there, trying to remember what it was I done, and ain't recalled it to this day. Once in a while, I would think it was coming to me, but it never come. "Maybe they put you in by mistake," the old lady said vaguely. "No," he said, "it wasn't no mistake. They had the papers on me." "If you would pray," the old lady said, "Jesus would help you." "That's right," the misfit said. "Well then, why don't you pray?" she asked, trembling with delight suddenly. "I don't want no help," he said. "I'm doing all right by myself." "No, lady," the misfit said, "I found out the crime don't matter. You can do one thing and you can do another, kill a man or take a tire off his car, because sooner or later you are going to forget what it was you done and just be punished for it." Alone with the misfit, the grandmother found herself saying, "Jesus, Jesus," meaning Jesus will help you. But the way she was saying it, it sounded as if she might be cursing. "Yes, madam, the misfit said, as if he agreed. Jesus showed everything off balance. It was the same case with him as with me, except he hadn't committed any crime, and they could prove I had committed one because they had the papers on me. Of course, he said, they never showed me the papers. I call myself the misfit, he said, because I can't make what all I done wrong fit what all I gone through in punishment. Does it seem right to you, lady, that one is punished a heap and another ain't punished at all? Jesus, the old lady cried, you've got good blood. I know you wouldn't shoot a lady. I know you come from nice. Pray, Jesus, you ought not to shoot a lady. I'll give you all the money I've got. Lady, the misfit said, looking beyond her far into the woods, there never was a body that gave an undertaker a tip. Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, the misfit continued, and he shouldn't have done it. He's shown everything off balance. If he did what he said, then it's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best way you can by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure but meanness, he said, and his voice had become almost a snarl. Maybe he didn't raise the dead, the old lady mumbled, not knowing what she was saying, and feeling so dizzy that she sank down in a ditch with her legs twisted under her. I wasn't there, so I can't say he didn't, the misfit said. I wished I had of been there, he said, hitting the ground with his fist. It ain't right, wasn't there, because if I had of been there, I would have known. Listen, lady, he said in a high voice, if I had of been there, I would have known, and I wouldn't be like I am now. His voice seemed about to crack, and the grandmother's head cleared for an instant. She saw the man's face twisted close to her own, as if he were going to cry, and she murmured, why, you are one of my babies. You are one of my own children. She reached out and touched him on the shoulder. The misfit sprang back as if a snake had bitten him and shot her 3 times through the chest. Then he put his gun down on the ground and took off his glasses and began to clean them. Without his glasses, the misfit eyes were red-rimmed and pale and defenseless looking. She was a talker, wasn't she? Bobby Lee said, sliding down the ditch with a yodel. She would have been a good woman, the misfit said, if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. Some fun, Bobby Lee said. Shut up, Bobby Lee, the misfit said. It's no real pleasure in life. There it is. So quite a, on the appearance, simple dialogue. And unfortunately, this story has been, I think, unfortunately, contaminated by Flannery O'Connor's declarations about the story. There is a principle, I think, valid in literature, that the last person who knows or is kind of entitled to make comments about a book is the author. Because either the book does its job, or the poem speaks for itself, or if you need to explain it, you are probably going to limit its span, its the range of possibility it opens. So she said, so I put some of Flannery O'Connor's declaration about the story. You should have it in just after the excerpt. She said, the misfit is touched by the grace that comes through the old lady when she recognizes him as her child. And she has been touched by the grace that comes through him in his particular suffering. Now, this seems quite stunning on the part of Flannery O'Connor as a declaration, because one of the things she says, and at the end of your handout you will find, I won't have time to read it with you, but I've given to you quotations from from 2 essays. The essays by Flannery O'Connor are incredible. So she wrote an essay on what does it mean to be a Catholic writer, and another essay on Gothic Southern, which is very funny, Gothic Southern literature, and she says that one of the problems of Christian or so-called Christian authors is sentimentality. Okay, everything seems so nice, and one of the ways of presenting grace is that it really every story has to come to an end in a beautiful way. So grace can be affirmed only if this happens. Actually, I'd like you to go and see it because I think this will help us to go through the story. So if you go to number 26 on your handout, you have some quotation from Flannery O'Connor being a Catholic writer, and a bit down there is a passage which is a bit highlighted, which she says, sentimentality is a skipping of the process through which any novelist should look at reality as it is, in its concrete reality, and an early arrival at a mock state of innocence, which strongly suggests its opposite. So she really thinks that wanting to go to grace too quickly, wanting to see grace too clearly, spiritualizing too quickly is really sentimentality, something that does not reflect the way in which grace actually operates in the lives of people. But then, if you go at the end, the very last quotation, this is from another essay by her, which is the Catholic writer in this country. This is from, some aspect of the grotesque in Southern fiction. The one I told you is very funny. When she says, whenever I'm asked why Southern writers particularly have a penchant for writing about freaks, I say it is because we are still able to recognize one. I wish we still were today. And then a bit further down, she replies to the readers who say that her story depresses them. There is this lady who wrote to her, Flannery O'Connor, and said, when I go back home and I start reading a novel, I want to be in peace. I want to feel good. And your stories don't make me to feel good. And her reply to the reader's need to be lifted up. There is something in us, as storytellers and as listeners to stories, that demands the redemptive act, that demands that what falls at least be offered the chance to be restored. So there is something in us that wants a misfit to be converted, wants a misfit to be touched by grace. There is something in us that wants an happy ending to a story. There is something in us that wants to see this lovely, well-meaning grandmother who might have been slightly flawed in one way or the other, but really being so touched by grace that recognizes her own selfishness and is able to save the misfit. Okay? The reader of today looks for this motion, and rightly so. But what he has forgotten is the cost of it. Now, this is something that I'm always slightly suspicious of when it comes. I don't like Catholic writers. I don't like Christian. I really don't. I really don't. Everyone who tries to, because I think that literature, art should speak by itself. Everyone who pretends to be the interpreter of Christianity through art, very often, in my view, is not doing art. Is doing apologetic. Is doing something else, but not art. And art should be untethered from ideological commitments. Should be just rendering reality as kind of prophetically, as with visionary eyes as much as possible. What I want is a writer or an artist to help me see things, not to try to direct me in any direction, even if he thought or she thought it was the good one. So this prevented me from reading Flannery O'Connor for a long time. And then, a friend of mine, Jan, who might be watching now, gave me her works, and I kept them on my desk for 2 years or 3 years. And then, I said, oh, let me have a look. And it was because I read some essays by Gioia, a poet I really like. And what he said about Flannery O'Connor made me think, okay, let me have a look. And the thing is that, well, lo and behold, she is Catholic, and yet at the same time she's scathing, and you will see in the extracts of the essays I gave to you, when it comes to kind of claiming a freedom as a writer from any conditioning. She says, my job is just show reality as it is, whether you like it or not. My job is not to be sentimental about grace, about salvation. And that really struck me. And then I read some of his novels and stories, and I found that, yes, I mean, this is what she does. This is why her sentence about, trying to orient a reading of the story in a certain direction, namely that misfit is touched by grace, grandmother is touched by grace, is really out of character with her commitment, I think. And it has been criticized by a number of other people. But when it comes, one of the reasons why I'm always slightly suspicious about also Catholic, especially Catholic writer, is always the sense that you have to pay for it. There is a cost for it. You can be saved only if you suffer, this kind of stuff, which is typical. I mean, I've read so many of them. So I was quite suspicious of this sentence. But then, it is true, and this is one of the things that this story, at least to me, tells a lot when he says this lady could have been good if she had been shot, all the minutes of her life. And the point she's trying to make is that the veneer of fabricated, socially accepted goodness in which we wrap ourselves and give us a sense of being right and being good can be broken only by extremities, extreme situations that force us to look where we would not want to look, or we would not look otherwise. So the reader of today, she says, looks for this motion, and rightly so, but what he has forgotten is the cost of it. His sense of evil is diluted and lacking altogether, and so he has forgotten the price of restoration. When he reads a novel, he wants either his senses tormented or his spirits raised. He wants to be transported instantly either to a mock damnation or to a mock innocence. We are happy to be offered caricatures that confirm our kind of comfort in the way we have constructed our identity and a sense of goodness. Each one of us, in his or her own way, thinks is good. Okay, I'm not perfect. Okay, I have flaws, of course. Who doesn't have flaws? But I don't kill anyone. I don't steal. Or even if it has happened sometimes, it's just an exception. Every one of us works in this way. This is human nature, okay? And none of us likes this kind of self-perception to be punctured in any way. And we have developed incredibly effective mechanisms to protect ourselves against having to face the fact that that our notion of goodness individually and as a society is a notion of goodness that can be affirmed only at the cost of preventing us from seeing reality as it is, but also preventing us from finding real meaning, finding real goodness, finding salvation where it is to be found. Okay? So she does all these things at the same time in this story, and she doesn't need for the grandmother to be good or good in the end. She doesn't need for the misfit to be saved to do this. I mean, we don't need a happy ending, because the reality is that in our lives, in the world, there are not many happy endings. There are happy endings only for the people who can stick to their illusion of goodness in their lives, and at the end they can say, oh, I've done well, I've succeeded, etc., and are unwilling to see that this goodness is, in the end, and it must be said, quite selfish, because even if it is true for me, even if all in all my life has been not too bad, the vast majority of lives around us are very often wrecked beyond recognition. Okay, and this is really what we do not want to see. This is why the grotesque for Flannery O'Connor is a way of punching this kind of illusion in which we cloak ourselves. And this is why it is so unsettling to read her. Other than, I know a lot of people read her as of course, it's funny. There's a lot of comic aspects in her novels, in her stories, or just to confirm, kind of ideas about the South, etc., etc. But the reality is that if one really engages with these stories and lets itself to be not to be misled by even by her own affirmations about what she's trying to do, then I think there is a lot to think about. And at least, this story is, I thought I knew it. I chose it for these lectures because I knew it would give. But I have to say that in preparing this lecture, it has really, unsettled me in a sense, because I had to engage with it at another level to be able to give this talk today. A second declaration, so if you go back to Flannery O'Connor declarations about the story towards the middle of your handout, the first one he says, oh, the misfit is touched by grace, etc., etc. And then the second one, the grandmother, she said, the grandmother's head clears for an instant as she realizes, even in her limited way, that she is responsible for the men before her. She is responsible for the men before her. Now, responsible, when she says, why you are one of my babies, you are one of my children, seems to be, or it's understood as she is responsible in the sense that, she takes responsibility for him. She adopts him, okay? And this kind of touching gesture of love on her part, of reaching beyond, forgiving, because obviously he has killed her son, etc., etc., is something that changes the heart of the person. But it's much more likely that in this case, responsible means actually you are the product you, the misfit, are the product of my misguided, hypocritical sense of goodness. And that's where the story becomes uncomfortable. Okay, the misfit is so bad that who would feel that, oh, I have any responsibility for it? And this is one of the other ways in which we are ready to recognize, generally speaking, that our society, that the structures, that the government is not perfect, and then we have some collective responsibility about the poverty of a number of people, the criminality, etc., etc. But how many of us, what would it require for us to acknowledge that I am responsible for the evil in the world, and not the evil in general, for the misfit, that I am responsible for the people who mug other people in the street, for those who kill, for those who think about any other form of criminality. Of course, nobody wants to, and the responsibility is not traceable in a kind of direct way. But whether she's right or wrong, what Flannery O'Connor is trying to say is that only the acknowledgement of that responsibility is something that gets us closer to a real understanding of what real good and real evil is, and a real kind of honesty with ourselves. So in number 7 in your handout, I gave you extensive quotations from what I think is probably one of the most perceptible commentators I've read on this story. I've read, tens of them over the past week, but this is one of the one which really struck me most. In how is the grandmother responsible? In what sense she's responsible? And this author says, it is quite unhelpful to see the grandmother and the misfit in terms of good and evil, or innocence and evil. A bit further down in 8.2, one cannot even fall back on the excuse that she means well, since most of what she means is to please herself by devious means. And you see, where I think Flannery O'Connor is very clever, is that, this is, of course she's selfish, of course she always tries to get her way, of course she gets everyone into trouble, but this is what all ladies do, right? I mean, all ladies. what grandmothers do, right? So she's trying, it's almost unavoidable to feel like a sense of, affection, or this is a character we can meet in most of our lives, and it's the and that's precisely is what challenges us in this reading of the novel, is how can she possibly be responsible for the misfit? And either we have to believe that the story is completely fails entirely, because it doesn't make any sense. You can't say that a grandmother is responsible for the misfit. But actually, what Flannery O'Connor says, well, she is. She is, and she recognizes it. And that's the moment, if you want, the moment of grace in the novel. Although she's shot after that, okay? And of course, there is no time to look into passage by passage, detail after detail, how the notion of goodness she embodies is precisely what has made the misfit. Because if you don't fit into that kind of lie, if you start questioning it, and questioning it not only intellectually, not only provocatively, but existentially, then you condemn yourself to be put on the margins. You condemn yourself to be shunned by this established order. And this is, I think, suggested by the passage we read earlier, where the misfit recalls his father saying, the problem with this boy is that he's always asked why. And this is going to put him into trouble. Okay? It's someone who just cannot fit into a model of goodness, which incidentally includes a certain kind of religiosity. The other thing which is absolutely pervasive in the dialogue between the grandmother and the misfit is this constant appeal, manipulative, highly manipulative appeal to Jesus. If you only should pray, Jesus will save you. You know that you are a good man. Jesus loves you. This kind of stuff, and this is really what leads the misfit to kill the lady. And incidentally, this is based on a real story, because the origin of this story has been traced back to a trial that happened around that time, in which someone raped a girl and then killed her. And when he was asked why he killed her, he said, because she said to me, Jesus loves you. And he couldn't bear the lie. Not the fact, oh, Jesus loves you, I feel guilty, etc. Not the lie that this represented to him in that situation, in that moment. So yes, if you go to number 15 in your handout, says this explains the misfit's violent exasperation and the incongruity between what he has experienced and seen with his own eyes and the whole cultural edifice of Jesus-centered goodness established with all the weight of law and customs, from which, of course, he has been completely relegated away from. I want to stop here because it's. I think I said what I wanted to say about the story. I put much more into the handout, so I hope really you will kind of dive a bit more in the quotations I gave you and let yourself be questioned by this story, because you see, this is why I don't want to. I didn't want to start a series of lectures on the issue of evil and suffering by just talking theoretically about it. Unless we realize the extent to which this really impinges on us, touches us, in ways that are recognizable and in a way that really touch us, it does not work in the same way. It doesn't touch us in the same way. So what I find so helpful in this story is the way it unsettles us. It unsettles us because we don't like the conclusion. It unsettles us because of the, hopefully because it questions our own notion of goodness, and yet at the same time leaves us with the question, there's no resolution. So we don't know if the misfit is really changed by this experience or is not changed by this experience. We don't know whether the lady really understands she's touched by grace or she's not touched by grace. The only thing that to me really strikes me is at least there is an acknowledgement of responsibility. And that's really, it's not possible to talk about evil and not just, kind of flaws, understandable flaws, but evil, unless there is an acknowledgement of responsibility on our part. We are responsible for the evil in the world. we are responsible, for what's happening in Gaza at the moment. I don't want to be political, but it just is the example that is there. Not because we politically support this party or that party, but because we are all complicitous of a system that insulates us at the expenses of others. Just to mention one aspect. So we will look at the issue of evil differently if we let ourselves be questioned by stories of this kind to acknowledge our responsibility in it. That's basically, I think, what I keep from this story. So the question is, there is a nihilism in the end, but there is no pleasure to kill, which might signal to at least the beginning of a process of questioning or transformation, etc. Well, I think this is really interesting. I think it's intentional on her part to want to suggest the possibility of something without giving us any hints as to whether this actually happened or didn't happen. And because this is part of our, probably we should think about this, but at least I'll tell you how I feel it. I desperately want this person to become good, because I want to believe in the possibility that there is redemption. But I want it for him because I want it for me. And the problem, the question is that as Flannery O'Connor says, are you ready to acknowledge the cost of that? This is one probably answer. But the other thing is that also, why do we want so desperately a good, a resolution of that kind? And this brings back to what she says about being sentimental in the way we talk about grace. The reality is that a lot of people die in that way, die without, died criminal, die unrepented, die having done, evil without having had any either desire or possibility to convert. And we have to face that reality. We have to find a meaning in, or acknowledge that there is no meaning in it. Talking about evil is really talking about not evil when evil becomes good, but evil when evil remains evil. And look into this as kind of lucidly as possible, without any blocking any of it. And to me, that's really what the story is meant to produce. It's meant to reveal. I mean, and obviously we could talk about this more broadly, but when it comes to Flannery O'Connor, what she's trying to see in this story is, she's quite pessimistic. Basically, she says, unless you are shot, you will not recognize it. And shot, obviously, she doesn't want us to be killed, but unless you are kind of confronted, with some kind of, something needs to be punctured. Something needs to be, it's not just, I have to let myself to be questioned by, by the evil in the world, etc. No, we need to be, according to her, I'm not saying that this is my view, but according to her, we really need to be shocked into recognition. This is why she chooses always the freaks, the grotesque, and this is why there is so much violence in her novels, etc., because only shock can lead us to acknowledgement of what the illusion of goodness and the reality of evil. I don't say that we have to agree or disagree with it, but one thing is true, is that there is only one way. The greatest revelation of goodness, real goodness and evil, we believe, as ever happened in history, is Jesus' death on the cross. And we should ask ourselves, why was necessary that Jesus not only died, but died in this atrocious, kind of excruciating way? Well, nothing less than that level of shock, that level of annihilation, that level of destruction could have opened the eyes of the world on the reality of evil. And the kind of, we make full circle.